Hello and welcome to Armenian News Network Groong, Week in Review for Sunday, December 13th, 2020. I'm Hovik Manucharyan, and together with Asbed Bedrossian, we'll be talking to our guests about the following major topics: renewed fighting and the OSCE Minsk Group visit, expedited border demarcations, what will happen to Sotq, diplomatic relations with Azerbaijan. To talk about these issues, we have with us Emil Sanamyan, who is a senior research fellow at USC's Institute of Armenian Studies specializing in politics in the Caucasus with a special focus on Azerbaijan, and Pietro Shakarian, who is a historian and a PhD candidate in Russian history at The Ohio State University. His analyses on Russia, Armenia, and the post-Soviet space have appeared in several publications, including The Nation, Cleveland Plain Dealer, the Russian International Affairs Council, Russia Direct, HETC, and more. This episode was recorded on Sunday, December 13, 2020. Hello and welcome, everyone.
Hello, Hovik.
Barev, Hovik, Barev.
So for the first topic today, I want to talk about renewed fighting and the recent OSCE Minsk Group visit, which coincided with each other. So the Armenian Foreign Ministry announced on December 11th that Azerbaijani armed forces launched an attack on the line of contact in the area of Hintagher and Khitsabert villages in the Hadrut region. These are the last few remaining villages in that region that we have a foothold in. And as of today, it appears that Azerbaijani forces had taken control of Hintagher and Mount Dizapait and have reached the outskirts of Khitsabert. Per the announcement, we have 6 wounded. So while the Russian peacekeepers were reported to be trying to restore calm in this area, and previously was unprotected by them, we also heard the news that there is some fighting in the Metshen and Hinshen villages, which are closer to the Lachin corridor. The other odd thing is, prior to the MFA announcement, the initial response from Armenia came from Emil Sanamyan, Pashinyan's spokesperson, and it was as follows. The attack on the Azerbaijani forces in Hintagher-Khitsabert direction should receive reaction from Russian peacekeepers in the first place. Pietro, maybe we can start with you. What's your take on this renewed fighting? And in your opinion, does it pose a significant threat to the November 9th ceasefire?
I think it possesses a significant threat to the November 9th ceasefire. It shows the weaknesses of such an agreement. It also shows the degree to which, Russia, they're not, how do I put this? That Russia is not, it's very significant that they did not respond immediately to this. That they did not respond with a full force kind of, counterattack, let's say. And I think part of that has to do with the fact that, they're not sure what signals are coming from Yerevan about this, right? So, Nikol Pashinyan's government has not taken decisive action. I'm not sure if they had adequately notified the Russian authorities about the situation to remedy it right away. So it's a very difficult situation, but also it shows the degree to which actually Azerbaijan is kind of provoking the situation, and also the degree to which actually Turkey is supporting Azerbaijan in this initiative, right? So this is a very concerning situation. Especially regarding potential provocations from the Azerbaijan.
Was it confirmed that there were Turkish special forces operating in there as well?
I don't have the information on confirmation. Maybe Emil would know more, so I would defer to him on this matter. But I think the Russians responded very cautiously to this. They took more of the approach as kind of mediators rather than just kind of, taking an all-out reaction right away. And part of it is because, they are, they are not confident with the kinds of leadership coming from Yerevan. I think that's a big factor in terms of how the Russians are responding to this.
So, Emil, in terms of the Armenian response, I was sort of surprised that Manucharyan pointed to the Russians saying that, it's the Russians' responsibility to respond to this. Is this sort of a misunderstanding of each other's responsibilities? And also, the official response from the Armenian MFA came 2 days after the fighting had started on December 11th?
Well, where to start? So, Armenia has given up on defending Artsakh a couple months ago. There's still some inertial residual presence by Armenian forces there, and, sort of especially in the area that was defended in the north and around Martuni. But the rest of it is sort of a mess, and the government in NK, Aray Karusin, also given up on defending Artsakh. So The reason these two villages ended up still under Armenian control is because this former opposition member of Karabakh parliament, Hovik Manucharyan, decided to organize some self-defense there, and a couple of former Karabakh army officers, again former officers, not actual current officers, came to Berdzor and sort of organized some self-defense around Berdzor. And extended that self-defense to that area, Khtsabert and Hintaher, or as it is known also, Könatahlar. So those two villages are in a very isolated area. There's only one dirt road that connected them to Berdzor, to Lisagor, which is outside of Shushi and is controlled by Armenian side. The Russian command, if you look at the maps of the Russian command, Russian peacekeeping command, actually did not include that area into their area of operations. And as a matter of fact, the maps showed that there is no Hadrut district. Hadrut district was renamed Jabrayil district for some reason. That just shows that the Russian command are also not, totally familiar with local toponymy and ethnic, all of this stuff, all of this minutia that, even most Armenians are not aware of. The Azerbaijani policy has been to push the line and squeeze out Armenians as far as they can from wherever they can. And these two places being very isolated and sort of not included in the Russian area of responsibility, at least there was no Russian presence there, and it's not even shown on the maps of the Russian command. So they decided to squeeze the Armenians out of there, and they pretty much succeeded, except the Russians did get involved and did send allegedly some peacekeepers there, and now they've published a new map. Russian Defense Ministry has published a new map that includes that area up to Hintaher, including Khtsabert and Dizapayt and Kirs, as the area of their responsibility. Now, what is that actually going to mean? Are they going to install an additional observation post there in Hintahlar or not? It's not clear to me. I don't think it's clear to them. It depends on who's going to push more, who's going to push less. That area could be considered an area of responsibility, but remain under Azeri control, or maybe Armenians would be able to return there somehow. The population is gone from there. They left early on, back in October. So there's not a local population there. And like I said, the reason they remained under the Armenian control is because this group from Stepanakert showed up there and decided to defend them.
Interesting.
And one more point I wanted to make is I think it's very important, my colleagues from CivilNet, Angelika Zakharian, and the cameraman, Levon, they went to Khtsabert last month after they learned that it remained under Armenian control, and made a video and sort of documented the Armenian control over that area at the end of the ceasefire. And, that sort of was very important documentation. No one else has done that, beyond, Hovik Manucharyan himself writing about it on Facebook. So that documentation was also important to, could have been, I don't know if it was, but is sort of the reason, that basis that Armenians could say, well, this is the area that we controlled at the ceasefire time, and we should remain under our control. Plenty of other areas like that have not been documented, and I'm sure there is going to be other incidents where they're going to try, like Hinshen, Metshen, other places that they're going to try to move up the positions, and where there's no one, no Armenians are resisting.
Well, I just have a quick question for Emil. What do you think about the allegations of Turkish involvement in this Azerbaijani operation?
Who made the allegation?
It was actually Nikol Pashinyan, apparently.
Yeah, I don't think his allegations can be taken seriously.
But I think he was basing his allegations on Semyon Pegov.
Yeah, whatever. I don't know. I mean, I haven't seen any evidence, and at this point, Pegov is more credible than Pashinyan, and Pegov is not very credible. So.
I would tend to agree with you, Emil, on this.
Okay. So in Baku, Aliyev was meeting the OSCE Minsk group around the same time as this fighting was going on. And they're supposed to be in Yerevan, on the 13th. So today, during the meeting, Ilham Aliyev was pretty derogatory towards the group and chided the organization for failing to resolve the conflict in over 2 decades. He also gloated about being able to resolve it by force, And if you watch the video, it's pretty hard to find a moment where the OSCE co-chairs are able to look Aliyev in the eye. The other noteworthy thing that I found from this 30-minute meeting was that the OSCE Minsk Group co-chairs several times in taking their turns referred to new realities on the ground, quote unquote. And the other troubling part was from their December 3rd statement, which omits any mention of territorial integrity and self-determination and only refers to the principle of non-use of force, which is pretty ridiculous given that this whole war was fought for 44 days. Pietro, maybe you can tell us how you see the OSCE Minsk Group remaining relevant here and what of their role remains.
I think, Hovik, to be quite honest with you, I don't think the OSCE Minsk Group is all that too relevant. I think that Russia now is the main peace broker in the region, and I think that the OSCE Minsk Group is more or less effectively marginalized as a result of what happened. Also, I think that this issue of the use of force is very significant, especially if we look at how Russia regards frozen conflict situations. Russia does not take very well to post-Soviet countries resolving frozen conflicts by the use of force. And so they effectively froze this Karabakh situation, but the fact that Azerbaijan made so many gains on the ground sets a kind of a precedent in post-Soviet space. So now you have a scenario in which Turkey is kind of feeling emboldened by the fact that they assisted Azerbaijan in this operation. And now you have Turkey sending advisors and drone technology to Ukraine to settle the Donbas issue by force. And so now you have a very dangerous precedent set in the post-Soviet space in the region for taking back territory by force. But as for this OSCE Minsk Group meeting in Baku, I don't see it as very effective, and I don't think it's just like a footnote at best in terms of in terms of the developments in recent days.
The only significance there is that Russian government wants to have international legitimacy in this issue. So if you recall, as Russia contemplated responding to the fighting, initially they basically from the beginning the idea was sort of the quote-unquote Lavrov plan, to which Armenia was not agreeing initially, and then by the end there was no Lavrov plan left. So they also tried to raise this issue in the UN Security Council to get international support and for potential sort of Russian peace enforcement action. And France appeared amiable to it, or at least they had a number of conversations between Macron and Putin. But U.S. was in a condition that it was pre-election condition with retard in power, and that never came through. And I'm still not clear if it was indeed United Kingdom that blocked that. Most likely it was, again, because there was no U.S. leadership on it. So in the end, they ended up, going the route of sort of bilateral agreement with Azerbaijan that Aliyev allows them to introduce forces into Karabakh, and they did that. But still, to this point, to this day, they're trying to internationalize things in Karabakh. They're sort of encouraging United Nations to come into Karabakh because they want to make it clear that that this is not a unilateral Russian action, and should there be some kind of follow-up in the future, if security situation deteriorates as it just did, they would not be accused of occupying another country or whatnot.
So let's go to the next topic, actually, which is about border demarcation. So in a parliament hearing on December 9, Tigran Avinyan indicated that a border demarcation process is currently underway between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Avinyan said that the negotiations will start this year, meaning this month, meaning however many weeks left this month, and will be done under a strict deadline. What was notable is that Avinyan mentioned that Soviet maps from 1928 to 1929 will be used as a basis for demarcation, among other maps. So Pietro, I'll start with you again. First, what is the urgency of officially sort of demarcating the borders now, in your opinion?
I think it's a very urgent situation because many of those territories, first of all, the border between Armenia and Azerbaijan in the vicinity of Karabakh, in that area, was never really clearly demarcated, in the sense that, more or less you had the war in 1990s, and then from that point on, that was more or less the border, if you could call it that, between Armenia and Artsakh, or Nagorno-Karabakh Republic. And so now you have a situation where these areas that are, seen on the map as being part of the border between Armenia and Azerbaijan now have to be defined, delineated. And it's a major challenge, because it's not clear exactly how these borders would be implemented as kind of actual state borders. Because before, even in Soviet times, we're talking about that these were inter-republican borders within a single state, right? So you have especially alarming a situation like in Khapan. There's that highway that goes from Khapan to Shikaho to Mekri, that kind of goes through Azerbaijani territory, and so it's a very dangerous area. I mean, it's very dangerous to kind of like leave that within Azerbaijan, because it's kind of an area that's extremely significant for the security of Armenia and for Sotq region. So, I think that's the fact that these borders are so unclear in terms of realizing them as actual state borders. That, I think, is going to be a major challenge moving forward. And what you need, Hovik, you need competent negotiators and statesmen to look at these issues. And I'm not terribly confident with what I see right now in Yerevan that they can do this. And actually, if you look back in the 1920s in the Soviet era, NEP, and we're going to kind of delve more into the history soon, but Axel Bakuns, who was the famous writer from Goris, basically was actually kind of representing the Armenian side in some of these border delineations, and he resolved actually many border issues in favor of Soviet Armenia within the Transcaucasian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic. And I'm not sure we have that kind of competence or pragmatism today within the current Armenian leadership.
And Emil, why did Alvinyan emphasize 1928 to 29 maps? Is this because they're more advantageous for Armenia, or is there some other reason that we may not be privy to?
I have no idea, to be honest with you, but I can only speculate. I don't know, maybe he wants to restore the Red Kurdistan that was in that area, Kelbajar and Lachin and Kubatli in the late 20s. I think it was abolished actually in 1929. But I mean, clearly they're much more recent maps, and the Russian military is using those recent maps. There is the general staff maps from the 80s that they're using as a reference point for NKAO borders, for the Armenian-Azerbaijan border, so they're basically using 80s maps, not 20s maps. But the whole point of demarcation is when you already have normal relations between two countries, diplomatic relations, economic relations, such as you have with, for example, Armenia and Georgia, or Georgia and Azerbaijan. And even then, the arguments over demarcation can persist over a long time. I mean, argument of demarcation continues, for example, between Russia and Japan, right, over the Kuril Islands. So those issues persist even when you have normal relations. When you don't have normal relations, such as Armenia and Azerbaijan, and most likely you will not have normal relations in the foreseeable future, the conversation around demarcation is totally moot. It's about control. It's not about demarcation. You're not going to have a demarcated border in the foreseeable future. You're going to have extent of control. You're going to have a position here and a position there, and there's going to have some Russian peacekeeping presence here, some Russian peacekeeping presence there. As far as Kapan roads and all that, I wouldn't be all that optimistic, that Armenians would be able to maintain control there. Most likely what you're going to have is a similar situation to the Lachin corridor, where, Russians will maintain sort of traffic into southern part of Sotq, just as they maintain traffic into Karabakh right now.
The only thing I would say is I quickly looked at two maps, one from 1954 and the other from 1928, and a friend helped me do like a, overlay, and there are some villages that would be affected one way or the other, such as Chinari, Artsvabert, Movses and possibly even Bert. So I was thinking maybe that was the reason why Avignon said 1928. But anyway, I guess we'll find out. And then my next question is, if Armenia, and Pietro, this is for you, if Armenia were to recognize Soviet-Azerbaijani borders, let's say, Emil, you mentioned this is not about demarcation, but about control. But I think Avignon mentioned the word Sahman Azatum. I don't know if it's official recognition, but if Armenia were to recognize Soviet-Azerbaijani borders, what would that mean for the status of Karabakh? And how would that affect recognition of Artsakh either as an independent state or even as an autonomous region in Azerbaijan?
I mean, in terms of, well, first, let me just say, going back to this whole issue of defining borders, right? So, the Soviet-era borders, as they were defined in NEP, some of the decisions were made based on ethnography, on economics. But ultimately, if you were to recognize, let's say, the borders from 1920s, and this is the issue, like a can of worms that opens up when you begin saying, let's go back to 1920s map. Well, there was actually kind of a territorial exchange in the 20s. So certain territories that eventually became part of the Armenian SSR were, at that time, maybe they were part of Azerbaijan, Soviet Republic. And you also had areas that were given from Azerbaijan to Soviet Armenia. So you kind of had more or less a territorial exchange. And it would create more mess if you suddenly went back to, say, a 1920s border, and then maybe parts of Ayazor, let's say, would become part of, Nakhichevan. It would be kind of, a very difficult situation and a kind of a slippery slope, let's say. Now, in terms of Karabakh, in a way, you can make the case that Armenia actually recognized Karabakh as being part of Azerbaijan by not recognizing Karabakh itself. I mean, that this argument has been made that by not formally recognizing the Nagorno-Karabakh Republic, especially during the recent war, that Armenia in many ways legitimized Azerbaijani control over those districts, the strategic districts that actually kind of secured the former Nagorno-Karabakh Autonomous Oblast. And because of this, I think that's part of the reason why we have the outcome that we have, that you didn't have the recognition of Karabakh, and now that you have actually the Armenian government, I think, actually recklessly saying we recognize the Soviet-era borders of Azerbaijan. I mean, if you just go with that statement alone, it's almost like they're completely abandoning Karabakh. That they're almost like saying, well, look, we recognize more or less Karabakh as part of Azerbaijan. If you go by that measure that, we're recognizing the Soviet-era borders of Azerbaijan, then you're almost recognizing Karabakh as part of Azerbaijan. So it's a very difficult situation, and I'm not terribly confident with the leadership in Yerevan on this matter.
We cannot pretend like nothing nothing changed. I mean, there's been a huge change as far as Armenia no longer provides its own security vis-a-vis Azerbaijan. So if that is the case, and Russia is in charge of Armenia's security, I mean, all of these conversations, what are they worth? The Russians will decide. So that's it. I mean, unless there's a change of government in Armenia and there is an effort to, increase Armenia's autonomy of action, then you could expect a situation where so there's some return to Armenian forces to the borders and some organization of self-defense, etc. But right now, the process of disorganization that started 2.5 years ago is continuing, this becomes irrelevant.
And this is evident from the skirmish of the past 2 days, right? Armenia just basically pointed to the Russians and said, and washed its hands of it.
But even as a formality, so we have a parliament decision or resolution in 1992 that says Republic of Armenia is obligated to protect and support the Republic of Artsakh and cannot recognize any document where Artsakh is mentioned as part of Azerbaijan. So I was thinking, okay, even if the current government wanted to do this, they would have to first have the Imkhail parliamentarians go ahead and remove this restriction?
Look, it would not be the most significant violation of law or constitution by this government. There's been plenty of others before. In that particular legislation, you also have to keep in mind was something that was pushed through by the opposition at the time, opposition to Leon Ter-Petrosyan, because Leon Ter-Petrosyan was inclined to agree to recognize Karabakh as part of Azerbaijan as long as there is some kind of international autonomous status and internationally guaranteed autonomous status for security of Karabakh Armenians. And the opposition was opposed to that. And also recall this is in the middle of 1992 when basically the situation was kind of similar, though not as bad as it is right now, with Azerbaijan basically capturing almost half of Karabakh Autonomous Territory and the Lachin Corridor coming under the attack. Right now, we don't have a Lachin Corridor under Armenian control, we have it under Russian control, and basically we have Karabakh under Russian control. But basically, this was not a position that was, even at the time, non-controversial by the Armenian parliament. And today, it is fairly clear that there is zero confidence of the current government in itself and zero confidence of others in this current government.
Also, something else I want to add about this, peace statement, Zayavlenia, that was, signed by Nikol Pashinyan. I think that if I remember the text correctly, when in reference to Kalbajar, let's say, that it said that the forces of the Republic of Armenia will cede it to Azerbaijan, not the forces of Nagorno-Karabakh Republic. So that also, I'm not sure if Nikol looked at the fine text of this, or if the prime minister looked at the fine text of this, but I think that also kind of opens a can of worms in terms of allowing Azerbaijan to argue that this was occupied by, say, Armenian forces from Armenia proper, right? And so I think that this government, as Emil said, it's not competent at all. It's actually very dangerous for Armenia, and it's not standing up for any kind of decision-making, independent decision-making or autonomy to maybe influence the situation, which is very critical right now. I would say extremely critical right now. Because the Russians, also as Emil said, they're coming, down here, they're trying to familiarize themselves with the situation on the ground, all these details. And, you need competent leadership to guide the Russians through that process. And I do not see it at all in Yerevan today.
Okay, I sort of accepted that, and I'm trying to understand what to do next within the confines that we have until things change. So the next question that I wanted to ask is, what will happen to Sotq? Because we talked about this last week with Asbed Bedrossian and Varujan Geramyan, but I wanted to bring this up again because of something that I wanted to mention. So one of the key issues that is probably going to be discussed or continue to be discussed during the demarcations is the destiny of the Sotq gold mine. And since the withdrawal of Armenian forces from Kelbajar, Azerbaijan seems to be claiming half of the mine, as we said last time, and has sent a military unit to the area to set up an observation post. And in response to the outcry from this incident, Armenian officials, including Pashinyan, seem to confirm this claim that Azerbaijan has 50% of the mine. This is a big deal since Sotq is the fourth largest taxpayer, and the mine has now announced plans that it's going to cut back its operations significantly until the issue is resolved. So that's hundreds of employees not working. Just one issue I'd like to bring up, which is my discussions with a former U.S. State Department employee. The Sotq mine was privatized in 1997, and at that time, a U.S. company was interested in acquiring the mine. And because of Azerbaijani complaints resulting from it, the U.S. State Department conducted a thorough survey of the territory between July through August of 1997. They did find that the mine was completely on the Armenian side. And it's baffling that when the State Department of the United States recognizes the mine as part of Armenia, that our government would go ahead and say that half of it belongs to Azerbaijan. I was told this document from the State Department may be obtained through a Freedom of Information request. So if any journalist wishes to submit such a request, you can contact us and we can provide more detailed information that should help narrow down your request and your search for it. But other than that, Emil and Pietro, do you have anything you wanted to add to this?
I want to check on the status of the environmentalists at Amursar, whether they're still there blocking the company from developing the mine. because as the most recent reports is that Azerbaijani forces are also building up right across from Jermuk, where the Amulsar mine is located. So I'm wondering if that whether the environmentalists will continue to oppose the development of Amulsar under the current conditions, and whether perhaps they could also show up at Sotq and maybe help keep it Armenian. I don't know, somehow. But more seriously, they're going to try to grab as much as they can, and unless there is resistance, they will take it.
Yeah, and actually, another thing to add to that too, it's the government is completely MIA to the point that villagers, municipalities, communities in Sunik are actually doing the border negotiations. Not even the Armenian government. The Armenian government is completely gone, and as far as Sotq, actually, if you look even at the Soviet era maps, they're not really necessarily clear. I have a whole series of Soviet era military maps that I scanned from University of Michigan, and you could make the case that technically the mine is on the Armenian side. So you need competent negotiators. You need people who can actually make this case, raise it to the Russians. And again, I don't see that coming from this government. And also the fact that the Azerbaijani forces control Kalbajar at all, I think that's a huge strategic setback, especially because, there was not even any fighting there, right? And that also there was think about the water supply, Hovik, of Kalbajar to Armenia. There's a lot, it's a very dangerous situation. You don't have, as Emil said, you don't have normalized relations between the societies.
The least they could do is to have it demilitarized, right? If we're going to give it back. So the last point, which I had on my list of things to talk about, and we can talk about other things, but it's all also related to this. So on December 8th, Andrei Kocharian from MyStep made a provocative speech in the parliament, arguing that Armenia should try to establish dialogue with Azerbaijan and not delay attempts to establish diplomatic relations with Azerbaijan. This is only a few days before the military parade in Baku, and maybe Emil can give us a more detailed rundown of what happened there, where Aliyev claimed not only Karabakh, but Zangezur, Sevan, and even Yerevan as historical Azerbaijani lands. Emil, what happened in Baku, and how do you view this statement from Andrei Kocharian? Does it have any merit?
What happened in Baku was a celebration of victory over Armenians. And, those references that you made to Aliyev's claims on Armenian territory, those claims were made before, it's just they're much more credible now because, they managed to capture 3/4 of Armenian controlled Artsakh, and the rest is controlled by the Russians. So basically we have a situation where and of course Erdogan's presence was very, very significant, that Turkey basically made this Azerbaijani advance possible with its air force and its mercenaries and its political support and its intelligence support and whatnot. So Aliyev is still in kind of this effort to balance things out with Erdogan and Putin. So he also kind of shows his respect and basically presents the situation as a tripartite division of Artsakh, with the Turkey, Azerbaijan, and Russia engaged in all of that. A lot will depend on how able he is to continue balancing those things. Of course, Erdogan's reference to Enver Pasha and all that was taken by Armenians as just a continuation of genocidal policy. But the more accurate here is, of course, the reference to 1918 rather than 1915, when Enver Pasha delegated his brother Nuri Pasha to lead the create an Azerbaijani army, or army of, it was called Army of Islam, composed of what we now call Azerbaijanis and some other Muslim peoples, and they managed, after Armenia surrendered, after Sardarabad, Armenia surrendered to Turkey, and this Army of Islam went and occupied Shushi, and this is the origin of this conflict. In a sense, because up until then, Armenians controlled Shushi and Armenians controlled most of Upper Karabakh. So, Turkey is sort of finishing the job, or going in the footsteps of Enver Pasha and Nuri Pasha, again returning Shushi to Azerbaijan. What happens next? Again, we're returning to the situation in Yerevan. We have a very incoherent situation there, and we hear incoherent proposals, ideas, such as that of Hovik Manucharyan. So the next couple of months will be about Azerbaijan cutting off gas supplies and electricity supplies and internet links between Armenia and NK, and basically linking NK into Azerbaijan's electrical and gas internet supply situation. So basically incorporating, and depending on how Armenia reacts to that, or the Russians react to that, they will continue doing that. And again, squeezing Armenians out as much as possible from the most isolated areas there. So we just heard about Khzabert and Hintaher, but I mean there are other areas that they will claim are actually their territory, such as Aknabert, which is in the northeast of the Karabakh autonomy, used to be known as Umudlu. Used to be Azerbaijani populated. That might be another. This is between Kelbajar and Mardakert. There's going to be other places that they will make moves to see to what extent they can take additional territory. And this proposals by Hovik Manucharyan, what can I say? Nothing to say about that.
I think actually when we talk about those proposals, I think they also come in the context of this very extremely naive and dangerous idea. It's floated by Nikol Pashinyan and his team of, we should reestablish diplomatic relations. Now we can open up the border. Now we can have immediate economic ties, and even the potential of Turkish and Azerbaijani goods even flooding the Armenian market. I mean, they're not making very calculated strategic decisions in terms of even these proclamations that they're talking about. I mean, it's a very, very dangerous situation. They're very irresponsible as a government. And I think that you need more competent, more strategic, more pragmatic leadership in Yerevan in order to be making these kind of decisions where they're supposed to be negotiating. They're supposed to be talking to Russia, let's say. And I just don't see that at all. They're like living in a parallel world, especially the prime minister. He's like living in a completely different world. And that to me is extremely alarming. And also, another thing I want to add too about Baku is that some of these statements made by Aliyev or Erdogan, they're seen also by the Russian leadership as provocations, essentially. And we also have to think that in the end, even if Armenia, let's say, if the Armenian government is not, let's say, interested in defending Armenia or Artsakh, then Russia, is going to step up to the plate, and they're the ones who are going to be actually ensuring the security. I mean, they already are in Artsakh. They control it. But even with regard to Armenia, at some point, I mean, let's say there's a scenario where Nikol Pashinyan might be tempted to cede more territory to Azerbaijan for some sort of dubious benefit, Russia would intervene to stop that at some point, because the existence of the Armenian state is in the Russian interest. So, Armenia really has to get its act together. If they want to have independent decision-making, if they want to stop the situation, I mean, it's a very critical situation, they need to have competent leadership in Yerevan. And right now, they do not. Right now, it's very dangerous, and the longer the prime minister stays in office in Yerevan, the more dangerous it becomes for the security of not only the Armenian state, but the Armenian people. The more precarious it becomes for the security of Artsakh. So the longer Pashinyan stays, the more destabilizing the situation becomes, the more dangerous the situation becomes. That's, I think, a major takeaway people need to see in this, that some people don't understand the depth of the seriousness of the situation. So that needs to be addressed immediately. I think that, in my opinion, Nikol Pashinyan, he should have resigned a long time ago, but he should certainly be resigning soon. I think he has to resign.
He made clear that he is not going to resign so far, and it seems to me there is not a core kind of critical mass of so far that would push him to resign, particularly that the Russian government has said that they're okay with him. There has to be some kind of self-organization that might occur in Yerevan between some kind of between the existing opposition and parts of the government bureaucracy. So one way for this to occur is if there is, for example, some kind of quasi rebellion in the law enforcement where there are a couple of prosecutorial bodies in Armenia. There's the investigative service, there's the special investigative service that's very loyal to Nikol, but then there is the prosecutor's office and the investigative office that are less loyal to him and sort of more of a weather bells and would go in the direction, the pushes, political pushes. And Nikol Pashinyan, with his prosecution of Robert Kocharian, had created a precedent where basically a chief decision maker, the chief executive, doesn't have constitutional immunity anymore. So there is a hypothetical scenario where a law enforcement body in Armenia brings charges against Nikol Pashinyan, court approves his arrest, and he's removed in that way, basically, by the law enforcement. That's the only scenario that comes to my mind that might sort of create this
Emil,
change of government in an accelerated way.
as the Russians have indicated that they are okay with Pashinyan, is that because they feel that the situation is under control from their perspective and that it's headed in the right direction?
No, because they made a deal with him that Armenians would withdraw from 3 districts, and it happened. So it was a big concession that he fulfilled. And, Putin, in his comments, has made clear that it's all about sticking to agreements and fulfilling agreements. And, it's kind of, they become partners in crime, Putin and Pashinyan. So they will, uphold their part of the bargain. And what Pietro said, that if Pashinyan concedes some territory, the Russians will oppose. No, I don't think so. I don't think so at all. The Russians will do only as much as Putin tells them to do, and Putin can't do this morning to night. He's got plenty of other things.
Well, I would say that I would disagree with you on this, because I think that Russia does have an interest in the security of the Armenian state, the existence of the Armenian state in the region. In addition to that, I also think that the statements that Putin made about the support of Nikol Pashinyan are more rhetorical than anything else, especially because most of the agreement had already been implemented by the time Putin said that, we should support Nikol Pashinyan as he's implementing this agreement, this sort of a thing. And in fact, when he was making the statement that, Nikol Pashinyan, he's not, you can't consider him to be a traitor, let's say. I think this was more because he was thinking in terms of, we don't want, to have a situation where any kind of new authorities in Yerevan would prosecute him, right? Because again, we have this unspoken rule of, former authority or the new authorities trying to prosecute the former authorities, creating instability, this kind of thing. So I think even though, you did have that precedent set, I think that Putin is almost like trying to kind of put a stop to the process by saying, he's not a traitor. But all the other signs from the Russian elite do not seem to indicate that Moscow is, in favor of Nikol Pashinyan. So we'll see what happens. But
no, you cannot say that they're in favor of him, but certainly they will accept whoever is the in charge. They made it clear that they're not going to get involved in deciding which Armenian is going to be their interlocutor.
Oh yeah, well no, of course.
Whoever is in the chair.
I would just want to say that they would not determine the leadership of any. It's not their style to do that. They would not do that. But they would.
Wait. Their style is they have changed. It depends on what exactly Armenia is being treated as right now. And I don't think Armenia is being treated as an independent state. Armenia is a Russian protectorate, Ramzan Kadyrov was not necessarily the most acceptable figure for most of the Russian establishment, but they settled for him because he was the son of the former leader. And, he managed to consolidate control. So if Nikol manages to consolidate control, they'll be happy with him. If somebody else removes him, they'll settle with that situation. But Armenians need to kind of get their, outlook clear right now. The state of Armenia has shown that, and the Armenian nation have shown that they cannot maintain their own sovereignty in conditions when they're attacked by a larger state such as Turkey. And that was clear from the beginning. I mean, any small state Georgia cannot fight Russia alone. Armenia cannot fight Turkey alone. Even Azerbaijan cannot fight Iran alone. So, because that deterrence factor existed, had eroded the deterrent factor of Russia, or I don't know, some kind of other arrangement between Russia and the international community, and was unable to prevent Turkey from basically killing a bunch of Armenians and capturing territory from them. Armenia had lost its sovereignty, had ability to conduct sovereign policy. So right now, the group of Armenians, or the individuals that are the most capable in sort of adjusting to this new reality and adjusting to it with the most benefit for the public of Armenia that is still there, will be the most successful. The situation is very, very similar to 1920, when we still had the Dashnak government that tried to kind of resist, and because it continued to resist, and that the focus was on sort of Bolshevik and Dashnak struggle, Armenia ended up suffering additional territorial losses. So we'll see where it goes, but at this point, the resources are not there unless something fundamentally changes with Turkish policy, Turkish approach. Armenia will have to be a Russian protectorate, and the terms and conditions of that protectorate are still up in the air, and it's up for so the thinking Armenians to find ways to adjust to this new reality with the most benefit to the country, even if it's no longer an independent state.
Yeah. Also, I would add to, you were mentioned about the degree to which Nikol Pashinyan could consolidate his position. Right now, it's very, very shaky position. It's unclear if you could say that a majority oppose him to be staying in power, but certainly a significant part of the population does oppose him staying in power. So he has a major dilemma. That is to say, a large swath of the population does not regard him as a legitimate leader. And that's a serious issue. If Moscow really wants to have a stable leadership in Yerevan, Nikol Pashinyan, yes, he's the leader right now, but
Pietro, but that was always the case. That was always the case with Armenian leaders. No Armenian leader had popularity above 50% beyond the first 6 months of their government.
You cannot compare it with
No,
any other
no. It's yes, but there was a substantial collapse in the early 90s, but Bedrossian sort of continued surviving until he no longer wanted to. So in this case too, it can continue. So unless there is a desire by people in Armenia who feel that what's happening right now is a grave reality, they don't want to accept it, and they'll sort of rise up against it. There won't be, the parliament will not vote against him. There's people that have shown that they're not, their rhetoric about freedom and liberty is just rhetoric, and that they're as sycophantic as the Republican Party was with Sargsyan and others were with the previous government. So you won't get anything. It'll just kind of drop down into the next year.
Thank you really, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
And that concludes our program for this episode of Groong Week in Review. We hope it has helped your understanding of some of the issues from this previous week. We look forward to your feedback and suggestions for issues to cover in greater depth. Contact us on our website at groong.org, that's GROONG, and on our Facebook page, ANN-Groong, or in our Facebook group, Groong-Armenian News Network. Special thanks to Laura Osborne for providing the music for our podcast. I'm Hovik Manucharyan, and on behalf of everyone in this episode, I wish you a good week. Thank you for listening, and talk to you next week.